Hey, everybody. My name is Ahmed Dents. Welcome to We Are Listening. Back at you again. Thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Ahmed Dents, Development and Artistic Associate here at San Diego Repertory Theatre. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you have been with us before, well, welcome back. Again, thank you for joining me. My usual co-host, my partner in crime, Jacole Kitchen, is not here this week. She is working on the pop tour over at La Jolla Playhouse. So we will continue to march on. Again, thank you for joining me. Spectacular guests joining me tonight. I will introduce them to you in just a moment. Just want to give you a couple of brief announcements. If you're coming into the room, please make sure that you have your camera turned off and your microphone muted. If you know anybody who wanted to get in and they might not be able to get on Zoom, please send them a message. Let them know we are streaming on Facebook Live as well. If you miss any part of this, you have to leave early. Also remember that this will be posted on San Diego Repertory Theater's YouTube page, as well as La Jolla Playhouse's YouTube page and the Old Globe's YouTube page, as this We Are Listening is produced by San Diego Repertory Theater in partnership with La Jolla Playhouse and the Old Globe. Don't forget, you can listen to this as well in podcast form at San Diego Repertory Theater's SoundCloud page, or you can go on to Spotify and just search San Diego Repertory Theater, and it'll bring up the whole We Are Listening catalog. I think I might be 2 episodes behind, but don't worry. I will have us completely caught up by tomorrow afternoon. So again, thank you very much for joining me. Now, before we get into tonight's episode and I introduce my guests, I do want to give you a couple of announcements. As I said, Jacole is actually not with us tonight because she is directing. She is in middle of rehearsal, and she is actually right now directing the pop tour, as you see on your screen, or you should see on your screen, at lajollaplayhouse.org. This is going to be an absolutely spectacular show. I encourage you to head on over to lajollaplayhouse.org and check that out. Also, I want to talk to you about another great show coming up, and that is our other partner theater, the Old Globe. Right now, it began on March 4th, Thinking Shakespeare Live, the Infinite Book. It is running through April 15th. Make sure you head on over to theoldglobe.org and check that out, along with everything else that's going on. As far as here at San Diego Repertory Theater, we have a lot going on. Of course, you are watching now. We are listening. But we also have right now Hershey Felder live from Florence. You can stream this Puccini. You can stream that now at sdrep.org. Also want to talk to you about the San Diego Rep Black Voices 2021 play reading series. We kicked it off just this past Monday with Polar Bears, Black Boys, and Prairie Fringed Orchids. It was written by Vincent Durrell Durham, directed by Rodrigo McCormick. It was spectacular, and we want you to come back and join us this coming Monday, March 22nd for, I don't even know the words to describe this play, just powerful. It is Baton, written by Deneen Reynolds-Knott, directed by Dexter Singleton. This is a very, very powerful play. So we really want y'all to join us again Monday the 22nd at 5:30 p.m. It is, we are asking you to pay what you can with a suggested price of $20. So we do want to invite you to come and join us for the 2021 San Diego Rep Black Voices reading series. And then I also want to tell you about a great show that we have coming up. It is Higher and Higher, a rock and soul shindig starring Chester Gregory. The New York Times calls it jaw-dropping, and it is basically like a Motown review. Please get your tickets and check that out. Again, sdrep.org, lajollaplayhouse.org, and theoldglobe.org. Again, thank you for joining me. Again, if you're coming in the room, please make sure that your camera is turned off and that your microphone is muted. Now, tonight I have some spectacular guests. We're splitting the country today. I'm in San Diego. One of my guests is in Los Angeles, and the other is all the way on the East Coast in Harlem. But it's all good because by technology, we're all here to be in the same room together. So I'm gonna ask these brothers to go ahead and come on screen, and please welcome to We Are Listening, Keith, Joseph, Adkins, and Jonathan McCrory. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight.
What's up? How you doing?
Hello,
Good.
hello, hello.
And I would normally be in Harlem because that's my home. I just happen to be in LA because that's where I work. But I'm from Harlem.
Yes, he is.
Well, we doing some Public Enemy. We doing some brothers gonna work it out tonight, man, and handle this thing bi-coastal. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Gentlemen, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As the audience knows, this is a showcase of Black excellence. It's a showcase of Black theater, the diversity among Black creatives, professionals, artists in the theater community, and I call it a showcase because, like I said, everything, and Miyamoto Musashi says, if you know the way broadly, you'll see it in all things. And I think that's what we need in this world today. We need to be able to see things, we need to be able to see things through different lenses. And that way we'll understand what our differences is, what the problems we have are, and we'll know where they stem from. And for me, when I first got into this industry, my pathway in here, as people know, has been mainly through administrative. I started off with ticketing in the system administration and in the IT. I now work in development. But when I started working in ticketing and I went to my first national conference, I was the only brother I saw who was an administrator in the room. And it was only out of a conference of 1,300, there was literally 5 other Black people. And I met one sister who was here in San Diego that I had never met before. She worked at La Jolla Playhouse, and we didn't even know each other. You know what I mean? So I think it's important that we know and see each other, and that people see us, and then we'll be able to understand what's going on. I want each of you to give everybody a brief introduction of yourself and how you got into this industry. I'm going to go left to right. So I'm going to start with you, Keith. Why don't you introduce yourself to the folks and let us know your pathway in this industry and how we got here.
Absolutely. I'm always going first. Last name Adkins, so they always picking me first. First in the class. Anyway, no. So I'm Keith Joseph Adkins. I'm a playwright, screenwriter, artistic director of the New Black Fest, a 10-year-old organization. Thank you. And it's interesting because my trajectory has had many different sort of curves, right? So initially I wanted to be a weatherman. So as an undergrad, that was my undergrad degree, was broadcast journalism, and I was all about being a reporter for whatever network. Got an internship at an NBC affiliate. Didn't love it, wasn't creative enough for me, decided to go into more creative world. So I started writing poetry. Long story shorter, I ended up becoming a spoken word artist, and I lived in Ohio, which is where I'm from, moved to New York briefly, and then moved out to the Bay Area for 4 years, where I was sort of like a spoken word person, taught 4th grade. And a friend of mine came to one of my poetry readings, and said my poetry was like monologues. I was speaking in first person, which I was, but I didn't realize they were monologues. And she challenged me to write a play. I did. Fell in love with the culture of theater. Fell in love with being. I mean, at that time, I was right at that time, and still am writing plays about Black people, casting Black people in them. So it was just a great experience just to see these Black people in the room, whatever. Saying my words. We had a Black director named Idris Cooper and a Fawoshe from the Bay Area. And I just got bit. I got bit by that bug and wrote another play, ended up going to grad school in Iowa, came to New York, worked at the Public Theater as a literary intern. And my career just kind of like escalated as much as you can escalate as a Black person and as a playwright in general. So, I did that and wrote some plays, was commissioned. And then ultimately I came to California to pay off my loans. It got me into television writing. And I worked on a show called Girlfriend right out of grad school. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even watch television. So it was like, if it wasn't indie, if it wasn't some African foreign film, I wasn't interested. And so me being in television in Hollywood was strange. It was a strange situation. But I was there for about 4 years, and I came back to New York. And when I was in New York, I heard the same complaints and gripes and legit concerns from Black theater artists about the lack of representation, the lack of authenticity when it comes to theater. And so I decided to start a theater organization that in some way or another supported the opposite of that, which means to find abundant spaces and opportunities and encourage and empower each other to create our own sort of paths and our own spaces where we can do our own thing. So that started the New Black Fest. So my life pretty much since then, that was back in 2010, has been juggling the New Black Fest, my own playwriting, and then, you know, TV and film, which I've come back into the last 4 years. So that's why I'm here. That's how I got here. You know, there's obviously much more nuanced, you know, right. Situations on that journey, but you know, we don't have 4 hours.
4 hours.
We'll stretch it out.
We'll stretch it out. Yeah. But I do want to say though, on that journey, I met Jonathan McCrory. He was just out of NYU undergrad, but long story much shorter. Once I got the New Black Fest off the ground and it, you know, had some steam, Jonathan and the National Black Theater, when he sort of took over the National Black Theater artistic leadership role, he folded in our sort of anthologies, our social justice component, and that's how our sort of connection sort of came to be. Yeah, so I just wanted to put that out.
That's right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's right, Jonathan. How about you? To give us a little bio for you and how we got to this point.
Yeah. So Jonathan McCrory. I'm from DC, so I'm a born and raised Washingtonian. When it was still Chocolate City, some people still say it is. But I was there when it was Chocolate City,
right?
And born and raised in that kind of cultural lexicon. As Keith said, I went to NYU. I studied at Duke School of the Arts. Like, I've been in kind of the theatrical frame for a very long period of time. Actually, my initial impetus in life was to navigate the world from a space of an architect. My mom always thought I would be a priest. So I landed in a job where I could do both, where I use a spiritual algorithm that theater is able to actually emote from. And I get to architect programs and actual curatorial seasons that are able to radiate out kind of a psyche and pathology and love and grace and healing that our community needs in the present moment. I get to really create spaces for the Black body to be liberated. And what does it mean to liberate the Black body for human transformation? Seeping, like really swimming inside of the technology of Dr. Barbara Antier, who's the founder of National Black Theater. A profound learning space for me. You know, at the age of 25, I became the artistic director of this and started to helm this beautiful institution, and really began to, with Sade and Nabi and Michael and Abisola, the whole family at National Black Theater, really starting to cultivate what does it mean to be a home away from home? What does it really mean to sit inside the space of creating home for Black artists? And that really, for me, resonated in a couple of areas, which was, what does it mean to create a space for residency so that there's a durational home? What does it mean to create a transient home that allows for micro development opportunities? And then what does it mean to create home that allows for culture to not be policed by its own people, but to be liberated by its people? How do you create the intersection for that actual sensibility to happen? Because, you know, I might not be able to, I will not, and I'm not a racist, but I can be anti-Black. And so then how am I working against my own sensibilities that will then sometimes narrow the aperture of how Black people show up actually? Because of my cultural ineptitude. So then it's my responsibility as the steward of an institution that, in my personal opinion, that's named the National Black Theater, to support a leading pathology of creating built space and built programs that actually can hold the conduits for something like what Keith curates, and not question it from a space of, is it legitimately Black? Or is it legitimately X, Y, and Z? But cultivate it from a space of, why not? Why can't we? Are we in a space to allow? Can we allow? So that's a little bit. I mean, there's a lot. There's a huge trajectory of, like, you know, how I got here. And like, I was talking to someone the other day about how I got to be in this place and to be fortunate enough. I do see it as a huge privilege to sit in this seat and be able to talk to you today. However, that is like to what Keith said. It's like 4 or 5 hours. You can sit here talking about the whole journey. But just to give that abridged version, I think that should suffice, and then we can go deeper into it where we need to.
No, that's good because you actually went a place that like let's just jump off from there. I tell people all the time that when I was a kid, the one time I knew I was going to see black people on TV was during Soul Train, because when Soul Train was on, you were going to see the commercials were going to run. I knew for an hour I was going to see black people in the supermarket, black people at McDonald's, black people. Like I knew I was going to see black people in every form of life during the commercials. Right. During Soul Train, and then after that, it's like, okay, well, I'll wait till next Saturday to see some more black folks on TV shopping and doing stuff everybody else does. Let's unpack that a little bit, because especially in this moment we're in, we're understanding what, we're trying to get people to understand why it is so important, like the names of your organizations and why they're so important. We know that in America and in much of Europe that whiteness is the default, and people don't understand that. When you grow up as a black kid, you understand that there's this society where there's a default, where everything springs out of, all of the sensibilities, all of the images, all of what is mainstream, what is acceptable, what is okay. It comes from this default of whiteness. And, we're in this moment where we're trying to get people to understand, and I'm looking at some of the most spectacular things that I've seen over the last year, like Lovecraft Country, The Meeting. I'm looking at these things, and I keep telling everybody, I'm like, that's what happens when we are allowed to tell our story through our lens, through our cultural history, through how we see. Because, oh my God, it was so amazing. Yeah, it was so amazing to you because we told it to you. Right. We told it to you. That's why it was so amazing. Yes. And I'll come back to you, Keith, just so people can understand why is it so important that we, I don't want to say control, no one controls anything, but why is it so important that we develop this sense of being able to tell the story and tell it accurately?
Yeah, I mean, you already set up the foundation for the answer, right? So, we live in a systemically racist society that has been systemically racist at least 350 years of the 400 years it's been in existence, right? Because early on it was everybody was hands on deck, whatever. But and you also have colonialism sort of like creating the template, the sort of like the white template that is often in your face but also invisible, right? Like you don't even realize you're navigating colonialism or even systemic racism, right? And Jonathan spoke to anti-Blackness, which is clearly and directly a result of slavery and systemic racism and colonialism, right? Because when you as a person of color, a Black person, a person of African descent, particularly in the New World and also on the mother continent, when colonialism is the face and shaping everything, you often don't see yourself. So then you don't see yourself as a priority, or you have been sort of taught or socialized that you're not priority. So when it comes to the importance of our own images and us having the authority in regards to our images, it's about it's not just about seeing it, it's about the impact it has on spirit and heart, right? It's about being able to not have to absorb two-dimensional and one-dimensional images and depictions of yourself that's coming from whiteness, right? And sometimes, even Black folks sort of not reciprocate, but impersonate, the one-dimensional and two-dimensional thing, because that's what they're used to. And also in the game of this industry, TV and film in particular, in the past, the recent past, that's the way you got paid, right? You undermine Blackness, you sort of second dimensionalize Blackness, right? And so now we're in a time where so many different social events have been literally shoved into our faces. Now it's impossible. A friend of mine who's an intuitive reader says we're in a time of transparency. And once you see everything, there's no way not to see it anymore, right? And so now we know that racism, systemic racism, is happening every single moment a Black person walks out their door, and sometimes in their own homes. So for us to be in control, because I think it is important that we are in control of our own images, in control of our own stories, curating how our stories are told, and even challenging each other. And speaking, back to Jonathan said about the anti-Black quotient to all of this, like even challenging each other about how we see each other. and what is true and what is not true, and being radically accountable for the horrible depictions, and also radically accountable for the unapologetic, beautiful three-dimensional depictions, right? Because Toni Morrison, for me, was a beacon and a master of not caring about the white gaze, speaking directly to Black people, but also speaking to them with all of the complexity that is there. You don't have to speak to Black people with two dimensions of yourself or one dimensions of yourself. You can give them all of that, right? And so for me, that's why it's super, super important and urgent that we tell our own stories, and that we are in the middle, in the central part of conveying those three-dimensional images and sharing those with the world, but particularly with each other.
That's right.
That's what I got to say about that, bro.
You know, it's funny that we had a discussion about we were talking about some plays a few weeks ago, and one of the things that was said in the meeting was that, like, oh, I don't know about this play because this is just another play about who gets the house. And I was like, for your culture, that's just another play about who gets the house. For Black folks, this is a conversation that's just now maturing because we were locked out of that en masse due to redlining and everything else. And now when we're dealing with gentrification and we're dealing with all these other issues, and now people are like, hey, don't sell grandmama's house. For Black folks, that's a very contemporary conversation.
Oh,
so again, that viewpoint that, like, oh, it's another play about who gets the house, like you were saying, that came from that lens. That came from the historical lens that y'all already been dealing with that. This is somewhat new for Black folks in mass. So just to speak what you're saying is that I had to, but there was no one in the room to bring that point before that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to kind of tag onto that. So, like, last year, I wrote a screenplay that dealt with generational wealth, right? What we're talking about right now, the generational wealth. And my manager, who's a white woman, who's, wonderful in all her alliedness, didn't understand the theme. She didn't understand generational wealth. She didn't understand why that was important. She didn't understand, like, you can't do something else. I was like, no, this is centrally important to the Black experience. Generational wealth, like the fact that you and 4 other people are representing me and not a Black person, has everything to do with generational wealth and the lack of, right? So anyway, I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's really important that, we are in the room, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Jonathan, any more thoughts along that, bro? I know you expand on it a little bit more, but anything else about just why it's important? Like, because you're just trying to, we get it, and even if the parts we don't get, we were able to communicate to each other, very simply and easily, but a lot of people don't. They don't understand why this.
I mean, the very act of ownership is the antidote to slavery. The very act of a Black artist owning the capacity of their story, the direction of their story, is a direct antidote and a direct historical blood memory course correction to the kind of selling, the kind of oppression, the kind of historical trauma that is latent inside of our bodies when it came to slavery. So, like, we do not have ample and equal and reciprocal amount of time to own the spaces, to carve out the ownership. We will always be in a slave chattel kind of methodology, where our culture is the direct product of the abundance of another and not us. And then the well becomes depleted. So I think the idea of ownership, the idea of these stories that we love, like even thinking I May Destroy You, like these stories that we love where Black artists sat at the center of their time, owning their narrative, and saying, this is going to be done in my way with my lens. I think that is a part of a very beautiful moment in time where it's not perfect, but it's giving an opportunity of an antidote to 300 years of an oppressive society where we baked into our bones the notion that our intellectual, cultural richness was not ours to own. It was for someone else to make money off of.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, all that. All that.
All that. This song.
I want to ask you guys about this too, because I've been, like I said, I've gone from working, I've gone from working front of the house to ticketing, to IT, to management, and within, from since 2019, the end of 2019, I've been working in development, which opened up a whole new lens. Like it opened up a whole.
A whole other
I try to explain to people.
You thought you understood life, and then when you get into development, you're just
when I started understanding the funding and grants and how we just have not been part of that game, and it's every day it blows my mind. But you guys, as being artistic directors, tell me, give me a little bit of your thoughts about how important it is that we. Let me back up. I'm sorry, I'm mixing. We have so many young people that are coming up now, and I find myself being in it. I find myself now that I've been doing this in these different aspects that I've done is relaying information even to smaller institutions that don't have the knowledge of what it is to get the funding, how the funding works, how grants work, how all these things work. Can you guys give me a little bit of your insight into what you feel maybe needs to be enlightened to more Black artists, creatives, professionals, or whatever issues you see when it comes to funding and grants, when it comes to funding projects that are Black or BIPOC or anything like that?
So what I will say is that COVID-19 was a good disruptor in so many powerful ways. There's a lot of ways in which it was hurtful, harmful, and all the nine. I don't want to romanticize it. I am quickly, as you get to know me a little bit, I will go for the lemonade before I go for the lemons. I will quickly squish, add the sugar or whatever, agave. I know, Keith, you don't like white sugar, but add agave and you're just good to go. COVID-19 invited artists, individual independent artists, to start to, and actors in particular, if they so choose, to see themselves as fully autonomous CEOs. That they are now a business and an industry on their own. That they do not, because for a year, people have had to figure out how to survive and create a space of potential thrivability without the institutions that used to tell them you're valuable. We used to live in a engine where we were waiting for someone to shed the light on me and say I'm valuable, I'm worth millions, I'm somebody, right? And for a year, we've had folks have had to reevaluate the spaces that created their source of income, which also created their sense of beingness, right? I had an artist. I had one person on an individual independent artist say to me once. It was like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I haven't done what I loved so much that in almost a year, I don't know who I am anymore. And on some level, I'm not to belittle that because that's real. That was a choice. You could have redefined the very nature of your state of being. We all can. We choose to. It's all a choice. How we go through this is a psychological warfare, to be very honest. If we even think about going a little bit off topic, but it's still on topic, how we even were conditioned to say social distancing and versus what I've learned, they say in Mexico, healthy distance. The idea that we demonized the notion of our humanness, which is to be social beings, to gain a hug. When we think about how we are conditioned as humans, it's through the connectivity with others. And we have psychologically been ingrained to understand that if the three of us were to meet in person, is a violent act, is an act that could kill one of us, is an act that will not allow for us to actually truly be good citizens to ourselves and to the communities that we're connected to. However, if I know the health of my body, and I know that I am a healthy human, and I know the distance that I need to do in order to be healthy, that's a different conversation. Right. That means I'm also having a conversation with the totalness of myself, right? I'm having a conversation to say, how is my heart feeling? Am I healthy there? Am I healthy in my bones? Am I working out? What am I eating? You're having a different psychological conversation that's actually empowering the roots of who you are and not asking you to be socialized in a space of control. And not to say that they knew that this was going to happen, but that is going to be the existential question that we're going to have to combat as artists, as theater makers, as practitioners, is how do we re-engage the psychological warfare that has been ingrained for a year, and people have watched that year produce, when they were not social distance and when they were social distance, death, economic poverty, destruction of their very livelihood. And we're gonna have to question that. We're gonna have to challenge that. We're gonna have to be curious about that. And the question is, will we be? How will we be? As Black and brown folks who at some point did not I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think he broke that down. Like, real.
Because in Latin America, because in Mexico, it makes you breathe. When someone said that to me, I was like, that is profound. The difference between saying healthy distance and social distance.
It is.
Because the profound nature of a society saying, make sure you're healthy distance, is saying that I understand you as a human means that you need to be in community with each other. You as a human. And that's when, if you think about it, that is the very nature of what the news reports on, when like people gather too much together, they're not socially distant. So the notion we have been conditioned and trained in a very, very interesting way, which plays up a question that I think we're gonna have to ask ourselves for the long game, which is how will we begin to receive hugs again? How will we begin to receive family again? Even when we're vaccinated, I have been blessed to get the first dose of the vaccine, and I'm gonna get the second shot, and that's my choice. I know a lot of people are choosing to get it or not be, but I've chosen to get vaccinated. And even with that sense of protection, that known sense of protection inside my body, inside my blood, there's still hesitancy, latency, and wanting to understand how to navigate the very essence of my day being, my sociability, how I interact with people, what my yeses and my nos will be, getting on the train, not getting on the train. And that is fake, and that is mainly because of the nature of how this was broadcast and ingrained into my system.
That's interesting, because we were having the conversation, of course, as every organization is, but just having the conversation of, what does it look like opening back up? What are the precautions? And looking at what some other theaters are starting to do, and looking at, some theaters are going to go to a model to where, you have to be vaccinated to come in, or they're going to offer one night, people who are vaccinated can come in this night, and people who are not can come this other night. And, just going through, I worked on my first production as a legit actor a couple of weeks ago, and just even,
congratulations.
Thank you. But with that being my first experience, of course, of watching that process over the years, but now being involved in it, but with the added getting tested this day, making sure you're tested this many days before you go in and shoot, and then the back and forth to how many people can be in the room, and the mask on, and then just, like I said, this was my first real dive into this, but just for me, psychologically, and now on top of all this, I have to come in one day and film in a set that I have not physically been in, and on top of all that, remember these lines and emotions and all this and everything while you're worried about how far you are for somebody, and I got to put the mask on, and who can be in the room, and who can this, that, and just looking at how much energy that is taking up and how much time that is taking up in our planning to get back to business, to get back to making money, to get back to welcoming our patrons back into the door. You know what I mean? And it's like you're saying, it is a lot of it. You have to sit there and change the language, because you do start realizing how much of it becomes a hindrance to what you're talking about doing, because you have been looking at everything in this prohibitive or negative connotation, when the whole thing, like you said, how much different would people be looking at if it was healthy distance besides social distance? Because your mind, we're trained, our mind automatically makes these jumps to what social did. I gotta stay away. I gotta, and it's like, oh no, if we can then are you good? Have you been back? Who's healthy? Are you good? How you been? You know, we don't have those conversations. We don't have them. Our conversations have become, I mean, I hate to say it, they become almost boutique, almost like an I voted sticker. But well, what vaccine did you get? Well, I got this one. I'm not, how did you feel? You know, and for me, it's almost, I look at that and I get it, but I also be like, we're losing some of ourselves here. We're losing a lot of our human connection. Even while we're looking at getting back together, it still seems like we're almost leaving some of us behind.
I just want to pick up where something that Jonathan was saying about what this pandemic has exposed as far as within theater, within artists, which I thought was really important and profound around this sort of idea of being your own CEO, right? Sort of, and how the pandemic has exposed, and many movements have come out of this, the lack of equity, the sort of unapologetic lack of equity and the invisibility when it comes to Black people and the BIPOC sort of cluster. And I really think that for me, you know, when we talk about normalcy, yes, you know, the vaccine is, you know, important on a sort of global level for us to all be able to like function in the world. But then going back to normalcy, what does normalcy mean? Because prior to the pandemic, normalcy was our invisibility, somebody else, you know, a white person directing a Black play and not actually stepping to the side and letting a Black person do that instead, not having that kind of consciousness, like all those kind of things was what was normal. And I'm personally, I'm personally not interested in going back to that normalcy. I'm wanting to, like you're saying earlier in our sort of Blue Room conversation around challenging institutions about these mantras that they sort of started to speak during the pandemic about what we're going to do for Black and BIPOC people and all of that. One, I really want these institutions to be really accountable for these mantras, right? Like really, like where is the money? Where, not literally, but yeah, I guess literally and figuratively, where is the money, right? Where is the real advocacy? We see it in some cases, right? We see some institutions are opening doors for Black people to take positions of associate artistic directors or even artistic directors or whatever. But on the artist front though, what Jonathan was saying that I thought was really important is that it has broken down a lot of Black folks in particular who rely on white institutions to employ them and validate them, right? When you think about all the major institutions, educational institutions from NYU to Juilliard to Yale, all white institutions, all sort of supplying our industry with Black talent, right? And then these Black talent sort of following the road of these institutions, right? And so, but then you have the majority of Black artists and Black practitioners who are not from those institutions, who have been struggling day to day just to get an audition, just to have a reading, because this is what their passion is as artists, right? And now this thing has happened, which Jonathan was talking about, that's exposed how much hustle had been going on and how much invisibility that Black artists had to do in order to hustle, right? Like to ignore the racist casting director, ignore the racist artistic director, ignore the fact that the character is one-dimensional, ignore the fact that the character is the best friend of the white person. You know what I mean? Like all these kind of things, like that's the normal. We cannot go back to that. And so now what Jonathan was saying, like the idea of this individual CEO-ship, like what does that look like? I don't really know. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know actually what to say to artists right now about what the future looks like, what the new normal is. I mean, I know there's movements and we can talk about those movements, but I really don't want to, but because there's so many of them, like sort of challenging institutions and whatever, but I want, instead of challenging the institutions, which has always been the thing that we do from 1721, Black folks have been challenging institutions. That's not brand new. We've always walked up into the house saying this is problematic and we've been chased out, you know what I mean? And sometimes they let us in and we had something to say, we wrote our signature on the card or whatever, the agreement or the law. But so that's not new to us, right? 300 years of that, navigating that, right? But what is newer is empowering each other to look beyond the white institutions collectively, because that also has been happening historically. We also have been doing that, right? Empowering each other, looking beyond the institutions. But now we have to do it, I think, in a much broader sense. like just unapologetically look over the institutions and find ways to create spaces like Jonathan was talking about with the National Black Theater and his passion, creating spaces that allow us to heal, to have joy, where we see ourselves, where all things are possible. You know what I mean? Like, that's, for me, like, that's where I am, and that's the questions that I have as far as like this new normal, you know, with the vaccine, you know.
Right, right.
Because the other truth of the matter is I mean, like, history is our greatest teacher in this moment, right? When we think about what a return looks like, we talk about coming back to normal, and there is no coming back to normal, because if we think about what happened with 9/11 and flights, right? 9/11 happened, the flights, you're not able to go to the gate anymore. you know what I mean? You can't bring and they said we're gonna come back. There was all this thing of there's only going to be some rules for this one moment in time, and then we're going to return back to the old ways, and we're going to fly around the way we used to. And now the globe has changed its way of flight because of that one act. And so I actually say we all should get really comfortable being uncomfortable for a very long period of time, because that was a singular act in two isolated cities that was devastating, yet impacted a global ecosystem. This is a global pandemic.
But Jonathan, Black people, our whole makeup is navigating uncomfortability.
Yes, but no.
I'm saying, I'm agreeing with you too. Yeah.
But no, and I just want to say, if you have not gotten comfortable, because there are some Black folks who haven't really gotten comfortable with being uncomfortable. They haven't really gotten comfortable with sitting with the discomfort. They keep on romanticizing on the past and thinking the past is going to come to the present. And then what I'm really just trying to get at is that they have to grieve that. That's gone. What's in the future is something that none of us know. And the charting is from our own indigenous imagination. To your point, it is a part of that blood resilience, that joy resilience, that grace resilience that will pass us through this womb. This is an awakening. This is a birth of a new economy. This is the birth of a new kind of society, a new way of creating, a new way of partnerships. However, one has to let go of the very tethering vibration that brought that like, it's like an umbilical cord. You can't keep the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord doesn't stay with you when you birth.
Right. Once it vibrates into it. It's like, look, I'm done working. Y'all got babies on his own.
Right. It's like, you know, I spent, along with all these years, like a casualty of the pandemic was my media, my broadcasting career. I worked here at Smooth Jazz 98.1 since 2005. You know, I finally got to the point to where I was doing a morning show, Smooth Jazz, and now I have Pop Saturday. I had a neo soul show where I was doing neo soul and hip hop jazz. So I was bringing Gang Starr, and I'm bringing Flowetry, and I'm bringing Alice Coltrane, and I'm bringing all that. And, you know, the pandemic comes along and I'm furloughed. But through all of that, I realized everything that I went through in that space to carve out my identity and to remain true to my identity, and how much I didn't progress as much as other people because I remained Ahmed Kenyatta Dents. I remained my voice. I remained how I talk. And ever since I've been gone, the thought keeps coming back, and my mind is like, I'm not going back to that. I'm not going back to that. I'm continuing to work out my own power, how long it takes. I'm continuing to try to do this thing on my own because I know my own voice. But at the same time, as you know, as you guys are talking, that's the discussion that's coming up, right? Do we stay in this? Do we create our own? And I've been telling people, well, for me, it's a hybrid. For those of us who are in these institutions and are fighting to hopefully, you know, we don't trust nothing. Like we know. We've heard, like you said, we've been fighting and hearing all this like since wherever. We've heard all the promises, but I'm gonna always fight. I love the institution I work at. I have a relationship with it. But for me, it's a hybrid. And so I take everything I've learned and everything I'm learning, and I take that to the San Diego Black Artists Collective, this collective of young Blacks who are not tied to organizations, and they're trying to find their way individually. And so, but I understand the gap of the institutional knowledge that they don't have and that smaller organizations don't have. And for me, it's like, well, if I'm here and as long as I'm here, I'm going to take everything I learn and the resources I have in this system and I'm not encouraging them to come jump in this system, but I'm going to take what I learned. They're like, hey, these are the tools that the big boys use. This is what this looks like, and give it to them. You know what I mean? So I see it like as a hybrid. It's like, yo, we take what we're learning here and we pass that on to the younger and the independent so that they can build upon those tools and be a part of the game as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, like, I think that there's a certain, I think both of you have used the word resiliency. There's a certain level of resiliency that this new generation needs because, you know, the historical pattern, right, with Black people is that there's some big event that challenges our humanity, challenges our safety. And so we migrate, right? We either physically migrate, we spiritually migrate, and we build new institutions, new spiritual institutions, new religious institutions, new home institutions. And then once we're in this new space, and for the sake of the conversation, a physical space, say Chicago, we are able to open up all of our mom and pops. Everything that we've always wanted to do, what we couldn't do in the safe space, in the normalcy, we can now do in our own new normalcy. But then this pattern of that is that whiteness as a systemic entity will come in and then dangle opportunity and abundance in front of those mom and pops, and then the mom and pops shut down, and then we're back into the same pattern again. And so I'm just saying that it's also important, we talk about resiliency in the new generation, for the new generation to be informed and so encouraged to not relinquish the importance of a new normalcy, the importance of keeping your own voice, the importance of authenticity, right? Like that's the danger. That's sort of like the gray area that Black people always have to sort of navigate. And like the pandemic, it's going to show up again. And it's kind of showing up already.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jonathan, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm not quite.
We all vibing on the same. We're on the same vibration.
I mean, I was only going to add uplifting everything what everyone's saying, and just want to add this one POV lens that I do see Black artists doing sometimes, and I just want to say that, like, yes, learn the tools of the quote unquote master. However, do not adopt the tools to the place where you become the master, right? And that's when the oppression just has a different face to it, but it's still oppression. And I just invite, if we were to look at a lot of our indigenous practices, they awaken a essence of not calling people out or things out. It's an indigenous practice of calling a lot of things in, like getting really soft, really getting intimate with ourselves, allowing that intimacy to create a kind of a pressure point that might actually name where you were also wrong in that process, how you also were the person to attract such a violent act.
In the old normal, right? Yeah. Right.
So I just think, I think as we start to populate this kind of, I really do think it is a new economy. As we start to populate what this new economy is, it is the most profound, level-setting, a catalytic game changer that can actually help us not to replicate patterns of systemic hurt, systemic pain, only if we are awakened enough to listen to that vibration that is us. The thing that is not like it's actually really quite beautiful to think about. Like when you were born perfect, whole, and complete, you were conditioned to think that you were not. Mm-hmm. So then my question to you is that then how do you return back to that wholeness? What is your quest to returning back to that perfect, whole, complete understanding and ownership of yourself that allows for you to understand? Like for me, I was born with dyslexia, ADD, and something else. My writing used to be awful. My speaking used to be awful. That is where my blessing is, though. I learned how to acquire, how to utilize that thing that was my disability as an elixir to allow for my gift to shine through. So like, in what ways are we doing that? In what ways are we leaning into that curiosity? In what ways are we allowing that thing that we shun away from, that we live in, that we tuck away in the dark corners of our psyche, of our being? In what ways are we allowing for it to have light? What ways are we allowing it to have room? Because the ways that it has room is the ways in which we start to feel like whole human. Being whole is, I think, how we move as a humanity forward.
No, I think that's profound, because, you know, I said this in a meeting the other day. I think two of the words that are being used so much by a lot of people these days, but a lot of people using them don't really know what they're saying, is transcendence and transformative. And people say transformative, and my mind goes, do you know what transformative means? And like the conversation we're having is, I think that we need to get back to this in the arts. Like for me, like even like you're saying, language, I've been trying to change something I've said all my life, and I heard Alan Watts recording the other day, and it blew my mind, where it was basically like, stop saying you were born into this world. You were born out of this world the same way a flower is born out of the ground. Those little things, people might not think that's a lot, but that's huge when you think about the difference in that language. Stop saying you were born into this world from some other place. No, you were born out. You were born out of this, just like a seed out of the ground. And so when we start having that again, and you know, my vision for philanthropy with theater is also like, yeah, great, we get the grant for this show, we get the grant for this project, we get the grant, but we also need to, you know, I speak to it here at San Diego Rep. We're downtown. We're in this footprint right in the middle of downtown San Diego, and many of our patrons for years have had to step over homeless people to get to their seat. They've had to step over homeless people in whatever parking garage they parked in to walk down the street and get to the theater. So for me, it's imperative that we develop in our funds and in our grants and in what we do and where we spend our time, in not just the physical aspect of this place we inhabit, but how are we being a neighbor to those who other of those who inhabit this space they're in? How are we being a neighbor to the organizations that are struggling on this footprint to take care of and feed and provide haircuts and provide supplies to the homeless people that we drive by and wave at every day, that we have to walk around on the sidewalk in order to get in and get to the show? How do we provide that? How are we serving the youth of this you know, of our neighborhood? How are we serving them by strictly having all volunteers or all internships, when we have people who have the same passion, but they got to decide between volunteering at the theater or going to work at McDonald's or going to work at Starbucks? It would be great if they could come in and learn how to usher, if they could come in and work behind the concession stand, if they could come in and shadow somebody in the box office, and starting off on that same type of totem pole. But now they're not having to do this. They're able to come in and with the thing about this, when you come into a theater at that age, at that place in life, then you are learning how to deal with people from different classes, different economic sets. You're learning different communication skills. You're learning a wide variety of people that come into the theater. And I think those things seem very small, but they're huge in the long run. Right. Huge. Right.
I mean, the one thing I was just going to bring up when you talk about transformation is, again, I'm going back to nature. Nature gives us a great example of it that I love to point to when people say they want to have a transformative experience or be transformed. I am like, do you want to turn into a butterfly then? Because a caterpillar turns into the butterfly. It goes into a cocoon and transforms. The very nature of it transforms. The only thing that is left is its essence, right? Inside that cocoon, bones are structured. Inside the cocoon, wings of color that were not originally there are formulated. Inside the cocoon, membranes are now having conversations with other membranes in ways that it never did before. So if you want to go through a process of transformation, if you want to lean into the creation of transformation, you have to have a conversation with who is the genesis and it's going into it blindly. It's not so, it's going into it from an intuitive understanding that I just want to build a cocoon. I just want to build something. I just want to navigate through something in a natural way that it's in concert with the world. And from that, we get butterflies. And from those butterflies, like it's the butterfly effect. We have the potential of having tsunami, having hurt, like because of that flapping of that wing from a singular butterfly. That is transformation for me. When I think about, I say I want transformation, I want human transformation, I want to go through that genesis. I want to assess, and that means that then I, as the individual, that's the next question. I, as the individual, not the institution, have to then go through that process so that I could be a vessel of example for then the institution itself. How can I dare ask the institution transform if I myself am not going through a transformation?
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
not then giving the space to let the institution even know what that looks like because I haven't done it for me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to tell everybody who's listening, if you guys have questions for Keith or Jonathan, throw them in the chat. I want to turn a little bit and focus on each of yours respective organizations and what's going on with you. I threw the links to the new Black Fest and National Black Theater in the chat for people to click on. But why don't you guys talk to me a little bit about what each of you are doing right now? What's good, and even more than ever now, right? As we talked about the new world changing, like we know that virtual theater is here to stay. Like I don't care what the doors open back up. Just the way technology is going, virtual theater is here to stay.
Look at that face.
And you know,
I might not come back to theater, y'all.
and organizations, even if you want to open back up live, you're going to have to do a hybrid because you're going to have a lot of people. You got people who have been turned on to theater in this space virtually, and that's the only way they're going to deal with it. And you're going to have a lot of part of the population that just they're not going back out. My mom still ain't going back to church. Like that's what her and my dad do. My mom ain't thinking about going back to church right now. She is happy watching church on Zoom every week. She's happy with that. So talk to me a little bit about what your organizations are doing and how you're navigating through this space.
Well, I mean, I will say, I'll just start off by saying that I just want to, I'll get to that, but I want to address the virtual, the virtual world that is, you said, is not going away. That hurts me, but I understand like Jonathan is saying, you got to sort of be uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Yeah. Uncomfortable with the uncomfortable. I will say this, I just had an experience at my alma mater of a newish play of mine that was produced there. And they're right now in the middle of post-production, like a film term, right? Like they're in the middle of editing the thing together. And I was just sort of coming in and out. So I wasn't there every day, but I was coming in and out. My bigger point is this though, at the end of the sort of the last day of final dress, before they shot it, before they shot the play for the film version of it, I realized that this experience for a new play, this virtual experience wasn't supportive of a new play because you don't have the preview period where you can change and readjust and re-engineer and rethink about and trash it and come back with a brand new. None of that is there, not even for the actors.
Right.
It's all like meeting this sort of technical deadline. And then also watching the actors navigate themselves in space with all these protocols. So it then sort of challenges and diffuses natural, organic, artistic impulses for actors. You know what I mean? The director had to be home, so she wasn't on site. So she was sort of navigating and sort of conducting from a Zoom frame while they were all on stage in math. So it was very, very interesting. So I just wanted to bear witness to my concern about particularly new plays in the virtual space. I think it's a curious thing. But to say, I mean, for me, like right now, like this past year, we normally have our festival every year. We're in residence at the Lark Play Development Center in New York City, have been for the last, I think, 6 years now. And so every spring we have a festival of new plays. We have six or five new playwrights that we, sort of showcase for like 5 days, and they present to an audience, and people come, and Black parishioners and audience members and lit managers and artistic directors, all that. It's a beautiful, beautiful time. But this year, I didn't want to do it because I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure what people were going to be writing about. I didn't want for all the plays to be about COVID, because that was on the front and the top of everyone's mind and hearts. So I was like, I don't know what to do, And so I sort of put that on pause. So I just put the festival on pause until we come to a place where there's much more kind of security around what this new normal could look like. But the great thing, though, is that the Apollo Theater, thankfully to Camilla Forbes in particular, created this sort of commissioning program, and the New Black Fest was commissioned to commission other writers to help kick off their new season at the new Victory Theater, which is going to be their new play space, their play space. So I was able to sort of like commission writers to write pieces for this new kind of venture there. That's been exciting, just to sort of collaborate with these thinkers and these artists. But again, I wasn't sure what to prompt them to write about. I say, do we write about survival? Do we write about institutional racism? And so it literally, like, as of 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I finally said, maybe you guys should just write about whatever's going on in the world, because now it feels like everything is going on at once, but it may change next week. It can become the pandemic again. It's a really interesting time, I think, for artistic directors in particular in my institution, to try to figure out what to do. Because I don't want a Zoom experience, but that may have to be where we are, Yeah.
I'll say that it is a very interesting time to curate. I'm really sitting with what is my role as a steward of influence. What is my role as being a culture shaper? And how am I being responsible with the knowledge that I know intuitively around the condition and psychic space that I've gone through since this pandemic, and I only can imagine my community has gone through 10 times fold in light of it. So like, I've really been sitting with that. MBT is in a really interesting space. We just, people might not know, our founder, Dr. Barbara Antier, bought a city block. And that city block is where our permanent home has been for the past 52 years. And that home is in the process of having a total facelift. We, during the pandemic, had to move out of our building. So we had to pack up all 62,000 square feet of space that we occupied, put it into storage. And we're about to demo the entire building and build a 20-story high-rise that will have 2 new theaters, state-of-the-art theaters inside of it, so that we can be the premier destination for Black culture in the 21st century, to produce Black art for Black artists and give Black artists a home, to think about and create a space for Black artists to actually fail up. What does it mean for us to be given the capacity to fail without the ridicule of what failure looks like? Because without that kind of failure, how can we actually ever grow? If you think about if we all were to think about how we got here successfully, there probably were many moments that we don't necessarily talk about that were failures, that honed and sharpened like iron, the precision, the focus, the dedication that allowed us to leap forward. Well, what would happen if a space just said, it's okay, I'm gonna give you this money, and it's okay if you fail. It's okay if you stumble. Just know that I'm gonna catch you. I'm gonna be with you every step of the way. And we're gonna do this together. This is gonna be a co-collaboration. So that's one major project, is building a brand new building, which is completely exciting. In concert with that, we're doing programming. Who thought? It's crazy. Ridiculous. Who does this? I don't know. So
the National Black Theater. That's
so we have some works that we're going to be doing during the summer. We're doing some outdoor theater in partnership with some institutions that I don't want to say it right now because it's not public in the world, but we'll be doing some of those public works outside for the public to be able to enjoy. What is known or publicly out there is that we are working on a rolling world premiere of a brand new work called Dreaming Zenzele. That will travel from St. Louis to the McCarter to a spot in New York. So National Black Theater is the nonprofit on record and been working on that show for almost about a year now. And we have been steadily working with every producer to navigate the rolling world premiere of that. What I would additionally say is that MBT has really invested in the technology needed to do radio plays. To Keith's point, we're not necessarily interested in doing new play development on Zoom or creating films per se. We love the idea of doing micro digital commissions. So providing artists fees and money to basically go out in the world and create something that we could digitally put in space. But when it comes to new play development, we're like, if we're gonna do it, let's do it as a radio play and invest in what a radio play might be like, so that we engage the senses of the sound, we engage the senses of the imagination, and we don't necessarily bog down the creative process by trying to become now a film studio. So we are planning to we're planning to do a radio play, Hands Up.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I told you. Come on, that's what it was. You're supposed to like already, and we had a conversation.
Yay! Sorry, brother. I mean, yes, great.
I am planning to direct it, because I directed it originally when we did it many moons ago. So I'll be directing a version of a radio play of Hands Up, and we have a residency program that we're invested in. We have 5 playwrights that we expanded our residency program to have 3 playwrights instead of 2 playwrights. COVID was more of the great disruptor than we all thought, so we weren't able to graduate our 2 playwrights who were already in our cycle. So now we have 5 playwrights, and now we have 2 directors, which is more artists than I'm used to us having to nurture. So we have paused. We're putting a pause on our residency application process so that we can invest deeper into the artists that we currently have, making it a more durational relationship with them, so that we actually manage and take care of who's in our flock already. So, I mean, there's a lot of exciting things happening at MBT. It's a great opportunity, and it's a privilege and an honor. And it's also daunting as hell, because like you're just like, I cursed, but it's daunting because like, when you go to a theater, this is what I'm doing. This is what I like. I look at these drawings, and it all feels like a video game. I just want to say that this all feels like a video game, because I haven't seen or touched or seen anything, right? So I look at these drawings, and I'm just seeing pixels, right? And they're just like, oh, there's a pillar there. I'm like, okay, we need to move that pillar, because I don't want to walk into the space, or I don't want someone coming to the space. They're going to do this regardless, because it's not going to be perfect, and be like, who designed this? That wall should be over here. When you go into a theater, all y'all have done it. I've done it. I'll do it to every theater I walk into. I'm just like, who designed this? Who said this table was actually a good idea? It's an awful idea. The chandelier, what color is that? That's an awful idea. So like, it's like really interesting to have to now own that space of like really forecasting and imagining, because honestly, for me, I'm only dedicated to MBT because I want someone to take my position. I said yes to MBT so I could create a role that someone would desire, and I could ultimately pass on as a moniker of showing what secession looks like inside of a Black institution on a national level. So that's I just went around the bend, but there you go.
No, that's all good, because I think that that speaks to something as I love the thought of radio plays. Like we have meetings, and I'm always saying like, hey, if there's any time to start thinking out the box and try something, it's now. If there's any time to just try something, and if it failed, this is the time, because the world is haywire. This is the time. I do agree with you. I do miss walking into a theater and watching a production develop. Like I miss watching it and see rehearsals, and then watch the previews, and then see how everything changed and the reaction to the audience, and what worked and what didn't work, and what sight lines didn't work. And then when opening night comes, it's like, and you watch the cast just on opening night just hit it, and you're like, oh, wow. I do miss, so I know that is, like I said, my experience that we just did. We went through a month of Zoom rehearsals, and then we walk into the space, and it's like, oh, this is it. We filming today. Whatever we do today, that's it. It's out.
Right, yeah.
It's a wrap, so, but I do love that the hybrid of being able to say, like, we're going to do that traditional model. And for those who don't want to come out, okay, well then you watch it virtually. Like we'll go through this, and there'll be people who come and watch it live, and then we'll also offer a streaming version of that, and that's fine. I love the it's not new, but I love the experimentation with bringing back the radio play. When I was a kid, my dad listened to all, like I sat, like I sat there and listened. You use your imagination and you get so engrossed. And if you do it right, it's just like you see the story in your head. And I think I'm a podcast guy. I'm one of those people who will sit there and listen to a 3-hour podcast. Some people think I'm crazy, but no, I will sit there and listen to people talk for a long damn time. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of people out there who will get back into radio plays and listen.
I mean, have we looked at Clubhouse? I mean, Clubhouse. Right. Clubhouse for 12 hours a day,
24 hours a day.
I mean, just like I don't know how they, but they do. So it's just like, if you can do that, you can listen to a radio play.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I will say though, like if we are going to really put our foot into this virtual performance culture, virtual production culture, I think that we need to then fold in the film and television industry, because I think I say that only to say that we're asking for theater practitioners to become filmmakers.
And we've seen what the problem with that has been as we
It's unfair. It's absolutely unfair for a theater director to suddenly try to figure out shots and camera angles and all these things.
And then between SAG and equity and the battles going on there, we had production, we had stage managers being left out of the whole mix because SAG is like, well, we don't have stage managers.
Right.
But you're filming, so you need to do this to our rules. Like, yeah.
Right. And editors coming in post, like helping the director shape the final production that's going to be zoomed out to the world. You know what I mean? Like you need a legit editor.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is. It's very interesting. Look, I don't want to keep you guys too much longer. I know, look, Johnny, I know you on the East Coast. I know you getting close to what? You getting close to 10 o'clock?
Yes, I am.
But look, before I even get into this next thing, I'm gonna tell. I need y'all to come back. I need y'all. Like I feel like we could have had this conversation sitting in a bar or somebody's living room and carried this. You know, like I'm really gonna want you guys to come back, and hopefully I can wrangle Freedom to get his butt on camera.
Tell Freedom I'm demanding him to show up.
Stop playing all your life.
He can bring the babies. Come on
now, you bring all of them, not just one, all of them.
All of them. Oh, I do got a question that just popped up. Let me go to this. Considering how we have survived the pandemic without theater, as well as its entanglement with white supremacy, elitism, hypercapitalism, why theater now? Why this medium rather than, say, TV, film? Like, I guess someone's saying, why now? Like, why? I guess there are people out there who are probably like, because we're looking at, I know here in California, we are the last on the totem pole to do anything. We got folks getting ready to go to baseball games. The restaurants are back open to a certain percentage. People can go do this and do that. Theater is like, we'll talk to y'all in a couple months. We're not even thinking about y'all for whatever reason. So I guess their question is, why theater now?
So I think why theater now is because we haven't truly breathed. We haven't truly felt intimacy. We haven't truly started to understand the nature of space, and space as an actual enclosed space, but outdoor theater as well. Theater is one of the only, theater is likened to church, let's just be very honest about it. It is church on a lot of levels. And it is a way in which that doesn't necessarily propagate or translate a doctrine per se, like a religious doctrine or something like that. It allows for a kind of democratized notion of ideas, of cultures, of personalities to be done in real time. A film has been shot 1,000 times, or has been shot at different angles, has been spliced, has been cut, has been manipulated, and all its great and wonder to create a perfect vision of something. Theater is one of the only spaces in a creative context where in that one moment you're seeing something that will never be replicated ever again. You're beginning to understand the preciousness of time. You're beginning to understand the preciousness of human ingenuity. You're beginning to understand the resilience of how the body can bend beyond the notion of our limited scope. So why theater? Why now? Because I actually do think that we need to get back in touch with the very notion of breathing in someone's very presence and allowing that presence to have an intimate connection to us, and for us to see the other people next to us who might be our strangers, who might be our friends, who might be members of our community being viscerally impacted, so that we also can start to understand how interconnected we are to one another, and not in a socially distant way, but in an intimate kind of connected way. Now, it is also the most violent space at the same time. So how do you reclaim a violent space? How do you reclaim a space that's been known as violent? They've called theater in New York City the super spreader. They're not calling the Yankees game a super spreader or the museum the super spreader. They're calling theater the super spreader. How do you reclaim? And that means also that it's it's a powerful space. It is a space that changes the hearts and minds of folk. So I just think that why theater right now, because our hearts and our minds need to change, and theater can allow for that to happen in a visceral way, in an anatomical way that is present, that is a rare gift, and that is in real time.
Right. How about you, Keith? Any thoughts on like why theater?
Well, I think everything Jonathan said is, definitely where my head is too. And I think too, I'm thinking now more on a practical level around, not to say that you want to be practical. I'm just saying, I'm just thinking, okay, yeah, you start laughing, brother. I'm complimenting, I'm supplementing you. I'm supplementing.
But you know me by now. I laugh at
and that's why I said that. So, but I will say that, just, what Jonathan was talking about, the intimacy and the importance of intimacy right now, and the healing, the necessity of healing, but also I think we are in a period of transparency that has been triggered by the pandemic and what happened, the events that happened in the pandemic, right? So everybody is unapologetic, hopefully transparent and truthful and honest, which makes for good storytelling, right? What Jonathan was saying about theater has, at least for Black people in particular, has functioned as a church, as a space to bear witness, as a space of reflection, a space to politicize and all those things, right? Empower spiritually, personally, emotionally. And I think that so many of us have seen so much and lost so much, and hopefully have evolved to a new level of understanding about ourselves and each other, that now is the time to hear those stories. Because those stories, like Jonathan was saying, will help in those spaces where we're around each other, will help really propel us forward to where we need to be in this point in time in human history. I really feel like, because the 60s and the 70s were potent for Black people in particular because of the radicalization and Black Panthers and Black nationalism and, Rome Neal and all this sort, Larry Neal, the Black Arts Movement, all of that, like that was a really important time. And those stories were pertinent and potent to that time. And so I feel like right now we are in a similar situation where the stories that we have to tell, because people are saying unapologetic stuff everywhere you go, on corners, in the store, Walmart, at the gas station. Theater is happening all around us. And so I think we as practitioners, and even what you were saying earlier about parishioners walking through the parking garage and having to step over the unhoused and the homeless community, now is the time to give voice. Let the people speak. That's what a theater is. If you stop and listen to one of those brothers and sisters who are unhoused and hear their story, that's the theater. That's what we need to be right now. And if these larger institutions are going to really play a part in this new normal, then they need to be on board with the folks who are on board about bringing voice to all the things that need to be said. It may just be the period of time, in all honesty, where we are just saying the shit that's coming off our chest and our hearts. It just may be theater, just an hour of just me just ranting about 2020, Right. And maybe in 5 years we can get back to mother and father are talking about the chicken and the girl comes home with her new girlfriend. You know what I mean? That doesn't seem as urgent.
Facts.
That's what's happening right now. So
I'll testify to what both of you said just with this simple anecdote. It's going to sound crazy to some people, but I saw Porgy and Bess when I was 12. And then I was front row for the Fresh Festival when I was 13.
Yeah.
So I don't know who I am without those two experiences live in the house. I don't know who I am if I'm not a young man, a young kid, seeing both of those things live. I don't know who I am today without those. That live, it's like you're saying, that intimacy, that seeing that thing. I know in 1985, I know I was in a select group of people who were in the San Diego sports arena at the dawning of hip hop, who saw the Fat Boys and Grandmaster Flash. I know that I shared that experience, and I can't find no video or nothing of that anywhere. I've looked, I can't find none of that, but I know I was there. Yeah, I know what it did for me. I know what my mom and dad taking me to see Porgy and Bess did to me at 12. I know what it did. I saw black people doing opera, and before that, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know black people and opera went together. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so people go with everything.
I just want to testify to what both of you said with that.
Right.
Look, you guys, I don't want to keep you. We're coming, but 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock for John. Look, I'm gonna need both y'all to come back. I need both y'all to come back and continue this thing. And man, I wanted to stay. That's one thing this pandemic has done. It has allowed many of us to connect on a level that we might not have without this. And this has been one of my favorite conversations. I thank both of you for coming on board. Look, everybody, I threw the links to their organizations up on the in the chat. If you miss it, don't get it, send me an email, adents@sdrep.org. Find me on social media at Ahmed's Voice. I'm easy to find. Find me. I will link you to these brothers. Look, Jonathan, Keith, thank both of you for coming on, man. And we're going to put the pressure. I know Jacole will be back with me, but we're going to put the pressure on Freedom to get out of his cave and get on this camera and get in this conversation with us, man.
That's right.
Look, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'll be in touch shortly. Let's stay in touch. Let's keep this thing going. Thank you so much. I want you all to have a good night. And everybody, thank you for sticking with us and watching us tonight. And if you missed any part of this, and I know this episode needs to be shared with your friends who didn't watch it, don't forget, it'll be, as soon as we wrap this up, it'll be on San Diego Repertory Theater's Facebook page. It'll be on our YouTube page tomorrow. It'll be on the Playhouse's YouTube page. And it will exist in podcast form on Spotify and the San Diego Repertory Theater SoundCloud page. So, Jonathan, Keith, thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. And we'll catch all of you next time. And we are listening. Thank you. Have a good night, y'all.
Thanks.
All right.